Ooh, we're back, baby. Horns up, talking Texas podcast. Fisher DeSoplis, DJ, Nikki Snacks Kreider, here to recap the game in Nashville against the then ranked number 25 Vanderbilt Commodores. We win 27-24 in a game where the score appeared a lot closer, I felt at least, than the whole shebang was. What worked and what didn't work? Nick, we'll start with you, then we'll go to Utah, and I'll close us out there.
Well, let's just start with the ugly. Penalties crushed us. It was so deflating all game long. And it's like we would get a big chunk yard run for 10 to 15 yards for a first down. And then, oh, what do you know? There's a holding call that wipes that off the board and backs us up 10 yards to put us at 1st and 20 and puts us in a hole where we literally can't get that first down back. I think we had, I want to say, 10 penalties for over 100 yards, 10 penalties for 107 yards. So basically the length of the football field. And anytime you're doing that, that's no bueno whatsoever, opposed to their 4 penalties for 35 yards. And I don't know what it was, but some of them were pretty ticky-tacky, but it was just on the same offensive lineman over and over again. And Gunnar Helm had a couple too. And not only does that back you up, but it just deflates your offense so easily. An offense that's already coming off of a struggling performance against Georgia that needs to get their momentum back, that needs to get big plays back. And we were just unable to do that. It was one of our lower rushing totals on the season, 104 yards. Obviously, besides last week against Georgia, where we didn't even hit over 30 yards. But we'd have a lot more if it came down to not getting those penalties. And then another, glaring issue that we had. I mean, I don't have anything wrong to say about the defense. I think the defense has been sound all season long. They got, I think, 14 of their points, because they were in our territory. There were the two tip picks basically. But those 2 tip picks attribute to kind of my big problem here is that the O-line seems to be losing their confidence a little bit and crumbling a little bit. Quinn was pressured way too much. He was sacked 4 times. 2 of those passes that I mentioned were tipped and then at the line and then picked. A lot of different pressures and hurries. He made some really good plays where he stepped up. I think I texted you guys that there was a big play. It was a big conversion that they had, maybe a second down conversion or something, but he basically felt pressure, stepped up, slid to the left, found the wide open man. I think maybe it was Wingo for, I don't know, 15, 20 yards. And that's the Quinn that we're dying to see. And so that was nice. But yeah, I don't know what's going on with this offensive line. I think that there's a much needed bye week coming up this weekend until we take on Florida. And there needs to be a lot of things figured out in these next couple of weeks for practice in terms of just technique and I think game plan in general too. I think the ESPN crew or the SEC crew broke it down pretty well that Georgia was throwing us a lot of different looks last week on the blitzing kind of patterns that they had, and that Texas's O-line is a slide protection group. And so if they're all sliding to the left, they're all sliding to the right, and there leaves vulnerable spots. And right, and there's certain times where Georgia was only rushing 3 men, and you should never get beat by 3 men if you have 5 offensive linemen, and they would all have a slide protection to the left, and they would take care of 2 guys, but that would leave that man on the outside on the right wide open to come and blitz Quinn. So I think there's a lot of different things that come into factor. Some of it has to do with just maybe the play calling, and the way that the offense is run, but also the technique and the confidence. So that's kind of my points there. But I think first half, Quinn looked pretty good. Besides that 1 tip pick that he had, he was rolling 15 of 15 at one point. The stat line isn't terrible. Threw for over 288 yards, 3 touchdowns, and then those 2 picks, obviously were not completely his fault, but definitely gained some confidence back for him, which is good.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Nice. Yeah, I mean, obviously the penalties before you get into a toss were
Yeah.
costly. And I think, just looking at, like, you're pointing out the offensive line, just again, looking at stats, grades, and all of that, I mean, it really unfortunately seems like one of the guys we were really hyped on, who was flying up draft boards we discussed a couple of weeks ago, Cam Williams, has been struggling these past couple of weeks, and that's our right tackle. And he was our lowest graded pass blocker this past week. And, the slide protection makes sense in that regard. But he's really struggled these past couple of weeks, and that's been unfortunate to see. And it's these little things again, like Vanderbilt. Yes, they're Vandy, but they're not the Vandy of old. This is a team that beat Alabama. This is a team that's had other big wins, and they're ranked for a reason. We did have a ranked victory on the road in the SEC, so we have to say that's a great thing, right? We went in and took care of business, but they threw some stuff at us, and we still didn't look like that dominant force, whistle to whistle, for an entire game. Yes, Quinn had those 15-15 moments, but we didn't look like that dominant force.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
6
mean,
points in the second half, not great.
not great at all. And I challenge a little bit, Josh, what you said at the beginning of the show, at least personally, in the way that I look at it, that this game was not as close as the final score allowed. I mean, last year when we were in the college football semifinal, we were one touchdown throw away from going to the college football final, but we didn't, and we didn't execute there. And you could also say that that game wasn't that close in the first half because Washington was beating the brakes off of us. So it's all about how you look at it. But for me, it's more, we only won this game by 3 points, and we outgained them from a total yardage standpoint by 130 yards. Their third down efficiency, they were 3 for 12. So our defense did what it needed to do there. And in my opinion, it's not necessarily that this game wasn't as close as it was, but why wasn't this game a 20-point victory or a 25-point victory? We still haven't played our best football. We've played a lot of football, though. And if you've played 8 games and you're a top 5 team, you're a playoff team, and you're a team that wants to contend, I'd at least hope that we'd seen a game where we were 90% of what we can be. And of course, that's something that we did last year, was get better throughout the entire season. And I still think that with that bye week, like you mentioned, Nick, and making adjustments, and sometimes the middle of the season, you just have different lulls here and there. And it's hard to maintain focus and maintain stamina and energy and confidence throughout the entire season. And I think we're dealing with lower versions of that than we saw in the beginning of the season, partially because we're playing tougher competition. There's just things that we need to fine tune, and I hope we can get there. And I think, again, with the injuries that we were dealt with at the very beginning of the season, part of me thinks that some of the play calling and the inconsistencies that we've seen from the offensive line, from Quinn at times, is because maybe they figured us out a little bit. Like, we're not continuing to mix in new looks offensively. I mean, Matthew Golden is a guy that we thought was going to be a go-to receiver for Quinn. He had 1 catch. He caught a touchdown in this game, but it turned out that DeAndre Moore was the guy that was peppered with targets, which we love to see. He's a really talented guy. I think early on in the season he was banged up, and that's probably why he wasn't being utilized as he is now. Wingo kind of limped into this game. He was on the field. He was off the field. The offense just isn't clicking. And again, if you're Steve Sarkisian and you're Quinn Ewers and you're supposed to have a guy that's a first-round talent quarterback, that is supposed to be our strong suit. And we were solid, but again, in the second half, we only played one half of good offense, in my opinion. And part of it is Diego Pavia ran for 65 yards. You mentioned we had over 100 rushing yards. Well, we would have had 125 if Quinn hadn't been sacked 4 times. And part of that is, I don't know if it's post-injury. It's not really within his skill set, but he doesn't tuck and run, and that limits what we can do offensively, in particular in the college game. Obviously, that's less of a big deal in the NFL, although some of the best guys can move quite well when you talk about Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts. So we just don't have as many pitches as we normally would have because of injuries and because of our limitations from the quarterback position right now, as good as he is. And we can't kind of overcome that hump. And the defense was solid, but I also thought in the first half that was like, they played really good against Georgia in the first half, despite all of the hardships that they were dealt. They weren't amazing this game. This was one of their weaker games throughout the entire season, in my opinion. I know they'll pick that up, but no sacks for our defensive line with its depth and with its talent. You can't have that.
Not
Yeah.
good.
I
Not good.
I do wanna give Vanderbilt some credit, though. I mean, they're not the same team that they have been in years past. Like, Diego Pavia has been one of the better quarterbacks in the ICC. I think they said that he had the best QBR heading into that week in all the SEC. I mean, there's a lot of talented quarterbacks in the SEC, and so he's a guy that won the job in camp and has really been able to give them another dimension of their game, not just passing, but being able to run it, as we saw. I mean, I think he's been the most effective running quarterback that we've played against this season. And that was even with a bum knee. He hurt his knee midway through the game, and he was still able to get some yards on us. So I want to give them some credit on there. Their tight end, Stowers, former quarterback, he looked good too. There's a guy they added, Cheryl, the number 0 wide receiver. We couldn't really figure a way to cover him that well. They threw a lot of different looks at us. So I do want to give them some credit. And I was a little disgruntled that we actually lost a little bit of leeway in the rankings, because you beat a ranked team, right? You're number 5, you beat number 25. You probably assume that you're going to stay where you are, right? Well, we go to 6, then Miami jumps us. And yes, Miami did beat the brakes off of Florida State, but Florida State's a 1-6 team. Now they're 1-7. Like, it's not that impressive. Like, you're supposed to take care of that game. And unfortunately, we just suffer the, getting a little bit of a loss here because we didn't beat the team by 17 points that Vegas thought we were. That we only beat them by 3 points. But I mean, I do think that this is kind of like, this was the reverse of what the Georgia game looked like, because if you look at our stat line compared to last week, it was the opposite, right? Our first half looked completely flat on offense. And then the second half we woke up, and then this is kind of the reverse. Basically, Vanderbilt was the one that had a better offensive showing in the second half. I just want to read you a quick stat too, just in terms of the last 10 drives that Texas opponents have had against us. Last 10 scoring drives. Sorry, I'll say that. 31 yards they've had to drive, 29 yards, 38 yards, 75 yards, 13 yards, 13 yards, 34 yards, 25 yards, 89 yards, and 38 yards. So that's an average distance of 38 and a half yards needed for opponents to put up points against Texas. Like,
yeah, I mean, our punters
yeah, I mean, that's us not being able to flip the field. That's us giving too many turnovers in our own territory. Like, the defense needs a break.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
can you imagine being in that group and for 3 straight games, the first drive ends up in an interception and you're having to defend your own territory right off the bat? What kind of mental weight that puts on you as a group? I mean, the expectation is that you have to be perfect or else the team won't win. Whether
Yeah.
that's true or not is not, it doesn't really matter, but like,
I
I can imagine how I would be frustrated. I'm frustrated as a fan, obviously, and if I were a player, I'd be doubly so. Of course, you're confident in your ability and you want to go out there and say, "Oh, we're going to shut them down."
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it means you're out there more, and it means you're out there in positions where you're more susceptible.
We don't see coin tosses in college football like we do in the NFL, but I'm curious to know if we've won any coin tosses in these last few games, and if we have, are we choosing to play offense first? Because if we're winning coin tosses, I would 100% want to play defense first every game, just by the way we've looked.
I'm nearly positive that we won the toss against Georgia and we elected to receive.
Yeah, I don't mind. You should come out hot on offense. Like, the thing is we had no Bond this game on offense. We had no Makuba on this game on defense. So those are 2 of our best players are missing in this game. That has to be noted. And that there's been injuries in the wide receiver room, like you said. So that's also been an issue. It's kind of been a revolving door of who's the guy that's up. I mean, but if you're supposed to have this number 1 offense, take the ball and go down and score. It shouldn't matter. Like, we shouldn't be like, oh, deferring because we're afraid we're going to not start off hot. Like, no, you come out hot and deliver. But the issue is
I rather have the ball coming out of half, making the adjustments, knowing how our team is playing. How
We had the ball coming out of half against Georgia.
Yeah, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I'm thinking of the Oklahoma game. I think that's what it must have been, where we got the ball first and he threw the pick at the beginning. That's what it was.
We had the ball coming out of we had the ball coming out of there. I mean, look, our punter has not been good. We can't flip the field. We have costly turnovers, bizarre fumbles. Like which are some of the Georgia ones. We had a turnover on Carson Beck. We turned the ball right back over in our own end zone, in our own zone. Like in this game, yeah, the tip passes aren't great. But from a defensive standpoint, I agree with you, Toss. Like this was one of our weaker showings. Taff has been a beast. Pavia dropped back 29 times. We had 0 sacks and 2 tackles for a loss. Just to comp it, Ohio State, who's ahead of us, a one-loss team, they played Nebraska this week. And yes, Dylan Raiola is a freshman, but he's a pretty good quarterback, right? They had 3 sacks and 13 tackles for a loss. Like that's a team that's closing and finishing. If you have all this talent, all this depth on the defensive line and front seven, you have to be able to get to the quarterback if he's dropping back 29 times. You have to be able to get tackles for a loss. Like this front seven is not that, then that's like a whole medium for this team. The front seven's not closing the door. The offense isn't closing the door. There's just that, there's no finishing punch to this team right now.
Yeah.
And there was earlier in the season. And I think Trey Wisner's ran the ball pretty effectively. Jaden Blue ran a bit better. Again, you guys mentioned DeAndre Moore. It's great to see him come on. And I thought Quinn looked good by and large. And when he's getting in rhythm, he looks really strong. We just allowing 4 sacks. They out-sacked us. We're supposed to have the number 1 defense in the country, one of the top front sevens in the country, and they out-sacked us. And we're supposed to have the best offensive line. And we had 10 penalties. It was just a sloppy game. And that's why we dropped. Like, it sucks. It's disheartening. But, like, we shouldn't be. We're not playing like a top 5 team in the country right now. It's just the bottom line. We're not. Like, there are teams playing better than us. Ohio State is playing better football than us. Oregon is playing better football than us. Obviously, Georgia. Penn State's 7-0. Miami's 8-0. And, like, quite frankly, like, I'm happy we're ahead of Tennessee. Like, they're playing really good football. Like, Notre Dame is hot. A&M, for all intensive purposes, A&M could be ranked ahead of us, as much as I hate to say it. They were great. They were down 17-7 at home at half.
Yeah.
Against LSU, against a really tough opponent. And they completely flipped that game script on its head against a really good potential first-round quarterback. They're not messing around. Arkansas, who we have to see in Fayetteville, was dominant this past weekend. These teams this is the wrong direction we're going in. While other teams are getting hot, getting better, picking up steam, getting acclimated, we are going in a reverse direction. And this is, thank God we have off this weekend, because this is time for Sark to get this group together and be like, look, you have a chance still to go to the SEC championship. A&M took care of business. Them and LSU, yeah, they had 1 loss. They had 0 in-conference losses going into this one. If we take care of business the rest of the way, that game at Kyle at the end of the year, Thanksgiving time, is shaping up to be a win and in for the SEC championship game.
It's going to mean something.
It's going to mean something, hopefully, for us. Not just them.
It's going to mean something for both of us. They've got a pretty easy schedule coming up. They've got South Carolina this weekend. It's not a gimme, but South Carolina's kind of at the bottom of the standings. Then they've got New Mexico State, which you should chalk that up as a win. And then you've got Auburn, who is also at the bottom of the standings. And then it's us. That's their last 4 games of the season. So
yeah, but I don't think they're looking at South Carolina as a gimme.
It's not a gimme, but I mean they're favored by I guess they're favored by 2.5 points. So it's not that much, but
really strong defensive line in South Carolina.
But they're 4-3. I mean, we're talking about a 7-1 team and a 4-3 South Carolina.
Yeah, but they're 4-3 because their quarterback went out against LSU. They could have easily beaten the Tigers. And then other than the Ole Miss game, they've been pretty sound. And they have Kyle Kennard on their defensive line, who's going to be a first-round pick. Like, their team is dangerous. And that line at 2.5, that screams betting the Aggies. It just does. Like, oh, A&M 7-1, they're extremely hot, -2.5 against a 4-3. South Carolina could easily win that game, And I bet you A&M is going in to take care of business because they smell blood in the water, as they should. They have us at the end of the year, and we're not playing our best football. And it's so frustrating because we show so many flashes. And there are so many individuals on this team playing fantastic football. It's just we have to piece together sooner rather than later a complete whistle-to-whistle dominant game like we saw at the beginning of the year. That team that we saw against Michigan, it's like the reverse of what we saw of Alabama last year. That Alabama, yes, we went into Tuscaloosa and beat them, unbelievably impressive. That team was very different than the team we saw that went to the college football playoff and won the SEC championship. It's almost the reverse for us. That team we saw against Michigan, who went into the big house and absolutely wiped the floor of the defending national champions, is not the team we're seeing right now, top to bottom.
Yeah, I mean, things have Jalen Milroe almost lost his job last year, right? And then he's going into this season as a top 3 Heisman contender. Now he's fallen off because other guys have had awesome seasons, but things change so quickly in college football. I mean, we were sent by one of our longtime friends a PFF ranking of the college football quarterbacks right now, and number 4 was Connor Wegman, who for 2 weeks lost his job in College Station as their quarterback, and now he's back as a PFF top 5 quarterback in college football. So things change really quick, and that means with our talent, which is the best part about this, if we can flip the script, what that will look like will look next level. We'll return to a contending level team. I hope that Sark he implores one position group in a competitive way to be dominant, because
it's got to be the receivers and maybe the offensive line, because the receivers are so good. Maybe it is the offensive line, because I think the receivers are doing their job and getting open. Like
I think so
running backs have had some drops, but the receivers have been by and large really strong. And I want to say one good thing.
For sure now.
The per pass, we were 7.8 yards per pass, the best we've had since Colorado State. So at least we're moving the ball downfield a lot better than we've seen in weeks past.
But a lot of that, it's not us moving the ball downfield because we don't throw downfield very much, but it's making the right throw and an accurate throw to our playmakers in space to let them make the plays themselves. And I think Quinn, he tightened his grip a little bit this week. He was a lot better and with the bubble screens and the quick passes against Georgia. He was all over the place. And if he has inaccuracies, and again, he's not a type of guy that can tuck and run when it's 3rd and 6. If you're not sharp and your completion percentage isn't nearing 70 or a little over 70, and you're making a lot of quick throws, you're in a tough position as an offense, because that's where we get into those 3rd and 10 situations. And that's not his game, is beating guys downfield. We're a playmakers in space type of offense. That's what we want to do. Yes, he stepped up on that one throw that you're talking about, Nick. It looked a lot like the Michigan throw where he threw the touchdown to Gunner across the middle. But I want to see more of that, because if you're a pocket passer, like, that's what you do. You deal in the pocket, but it means you have to move in the pocket. It means the offensive line has to give you enough time, which they're not giving him right now, to actually have some breathing room so that he doesn't have to just put his eyes down and figure out not getting sacked. He can pick his head back up after he moves around and find a guy downfield. If our offensive line can give him any breathing room back there, our playmakers will break free of DBs who are covering them. It just is. It's inevitable.
Or field position, because you're talking about these 3rd and we converted 9 of 15 on 3rd down. You're talking about these 3rd and 6s and 3rd and 10s. A lot of those 3rd and 6s and 3rd and 10s are because we're in 2nd and 20. Like, how many times were we in 2nd and
because of the penalties?
Yeah, penalties were terrible. Brutal. Like, you put yourself in a predicament, and like you're trying to get back all the yards in one play, and it just wasn't working.
Yeah, so I didn't mind the short calls, honestly. Like, I'm glad that's our game. Like, we do have good playmakers. We want to control the clock. We're not going to run it down their throats. Trey Wisner, Jaden Blue filled in admirably. I have no idea where Gibson is. Those guys have filled in admirably, right?
But yeah, they're not. They're not your typical powerhouse running backs that are supposed to put the band. Like, Bama's got Jam Miller. Like, if we had him, he would be for sure our starting running back.
Trevor Etienne is on Georgia, and I'm not even talking about the kid on Boise State. Like, they're a good running, but there are real true number 1 running backs where we have 2 number 2, number 3 guys that it's not their fault. That are our number 1 rock toting guys right now.
Yep.
And we have to beat them with the short passes. I had people in a group text complaining about it. It's like we have to pick these teams apart. And that'll open up the deep shot if we want it, because they're going to be coming in on us. But we have to pick these teams apart because that's how we're just going to control the clock.
Tennessee's running back's insane. Dylan Sampson, 17 touchdowns already this season.
Dude, they have the kid on Iowa. I mean, they have the kid on Virginia Tech. There are other guys that are doing a really good job toting the rock and moving this thing the way you should. And our offense is becoming a little predictable and a little one-dimensional just because we're not strong enough at that position. But that can't be an excuse for the entire year. We have to figure something out. And there, again, are flashes. Like in that Oklahoma game in the second half, it was Moses part in the Red Sea. Wisner had massive holes. They blew out massive holes. Like the offensive line was taking care of business and dominating at the point of attack. And these guys were able to get some good chunk yard plays and put us in a good field, put us in second and short versus second and a gazillion. Yep. So there's just so much slop that we have to clean up.
Much needed bye week.
Much needed bye week.
Yeah. I will say, I know Vanderbilt was ranked, but the teams that we play remaining on our schedule, Kentucky, A&M, Arkansas, personnel, top to bottom, they're better
Very
teams.
Good.
Florida,
they're good teams.
Even Florida, better teams than Vanderbilt, better players. Doesn't mean they're better coached. Doesn't mean they're going to execute better. But look, especially for Arkansas, you mentioned that, Josh. We're on the road there. I had a buddy who was at Vanderbilt. I think y'all probably had the same thing, telling you that it was 75-25 in favor of the Burn Orange. We showed up in Nashville and we were loud and we made our presence known. And so this wasn't like an environment that we were going into where the environment dictated that it played at a disadvantage to us. It didn't. We were essentially playing at a neutral site game. I know you have to travel when you're playing on the road and they have the comfortability of playing at home, but there was no pressure from the crowd, none of that. And
it's not going to be like that at Fayetteville, though.
That's what I'm saying. Every situation going on from here on out will be different, will be more challenging. And
what happened the last time we went to Fayetteville?
We got dog walked.
Dog walked.
They ran the ball all over us.
All over us. I mean, things have to change right now in the college football bracketology. That's, by the way, where we're at with this thing.
Yeah.
Bracketology. Andy Staples.
Joe Lenardi's going to get involved pretty soon here.
Probably. The week 10 is what they're gonna. Oh, it's week 10 bracketology. Sorry, we're 5 predicted right now to play Boise State, and winner of that plays BYU in the next round. They still think we're going to get in, and they still think we're going to take down A&M. I think everyone sees the same things, and this sounds like the whole podcast sounds like we're coming off a loss, but every time we don't dominate a team like we should, it does feel like a loss. If like gut check, like that game should have not have been a sweat at all.
Yeah,
especially after we're coming out of the half, it looked like we had our bearings. Like, we just have to punch these teams in the mouth and knock them out in round 2. It has to be. We can't let them stay in the game and stay in the fight. It's like there's no knockout blow. None.
Yeah.
And it's a little frustrating to watch.
Having Bond back will hopefully be huge. Makuba, obviously, you mentioned. I mean, in the Georgia game, I was wrong about that. They got the ball first because Makuba had that interception on that first drive. Wasn't it him? Wasn't it Makuba who had that kind of tip? He tipped it to himself and he came down with it, that interception. It was either him or Jahdae Barron. Jahdae Barron just ends up with a turnover every single game. But you're right. We didn't give it. Taft was awesome in this game. He was everywhere.
McDonald's filled in admirably for Makuba, I feel.
Yeah, he has. Yeah.
Like he's like, look, the thing is like on the defensive side of the football, it's just one glaring issue. For some reason or another, we're getting hurries, we're getting pressures. We just, again, the whole theme, we just can't close. We have it. Like Alfred Collins had a great game.
Yeah.
Great game. Like these guys, some of these guys are having really strong games. And for one reason or another, like defensively, like Sorrell had a good game. Like Jermaine Lowell, by the way, we haven't shouted him out at all. Like he's been really strong for us, I feel. Like he's a guy that's getting no love. Leona Lafau had a pick, right? A really good one. I believe.
Yep.
And so we're making big plays. We're doing good things. We're just if we sack the quarterback and get tackles for a loss, all the things that we're complaining about on offense, our field position in our position, on second and long, they have to deal with that. Then they
Right.
have to potentially deal with trying to flip the field.
Yeah, I mean, if you make the quarterback uncomfortable, and part of that is putting them on their back, on the turf or on the grass, whatever you're playing on, you make them make more decisions than one quick read to a receiver or one quick read, tuck and run to the outside and just beat the linebacker in a foot race. They mess up. We've seen it with our guy. That's a complex offense that he has to run. But when he gets beat up and battered, like he did in the Georgia game, we had to take him out because he wasn't seeing the field clearly, right? He was Sam Darnold, and Sam Darnold brought the phrase to everyone in the NFL when he was with the Jets. He was seeing ghosts, which already was a phrase in NFL locker rooms and with coordinators and how they talk to the quarterback position group. But that happens to college quarterbacks, and our defensive front and the way that our DBs can move and can make plays on the ball, we can make that happen. We can be a dominant group like that and make it just an absolute living hell for opposing quarterbacks. We're just not. And
we could have against this guy. I know he's a gamer. I wasn't like blown away by Pavia. Like he's good. He's a good college quarterback. He's fun. And we made it. It's not like he threw it all over us. It's not like he ran for 100 yards.
Like no, I think there was a point where I looked at you because we were watching the game together. I think there was a point where I was like, this guy's got 110 total yards of offense, and Quinn has 220. And it was just, the script was flipped. We were 6 for 9 from third down. We ended 9 for 15. So what does that mean? It means that after we were 6 for 9, we went 3 for 6, right? So it's about finishing, and you have to have the mental focus to do that in the second half. And we've seen that this is a team that can do that and turn it on. So I'm confident in that ability, but it is imperative that after this bye week, and we'll obviously talk more about it with Quan, we cannot turn the ball over on the first drive. Whether we receive the initial kick, or we get the ball after our defense makes them go 3rd and out. If Quinn throws an interception, it's not his fault. I get it. Like balls get batted at the line and guys make plays on it. That's just some of that's unlucky, right? It just can't happen. It just can't happen the first drive.
Our O-line is like, not to beat a dead horse, getting dominated because the tip balls, the sacks, the penalty. I mean, honestly, I'm most concerned about the penalties. 10 penalties is completely unacceptable.
Should be easy to correct. So
what are we, the Raiders? We the Raiders? Like what? We have 10 penalties. It's unfathomable. It's brutal to watch when you're playing like that, and it's brutal because we know how good this position group is.
Of course, it's all about expectations with this team, and so we want them to live up to the expectations. They're so talented, and they have so much promise. Like, and this season is not yet over.
No,
so we're reacting direly
Yeah.
because we know that if things shake out the wrong way, it could be, but we have an opportunity for them not to. And I know the players are in that same mindset. The coaches are in that same mindset. Like they're going to do what they think needs to be done to prepare, to make sure that they're ready to not have a game like this the rest of the season.
You have to, if you're a championship team, you have to look at this game and go unacceptable. Like I was talking to someone 2 days ago, and they were talking about seeing Bobby Lee at the Comedy Store.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, you were there. We were next to each other when someone said this?
No. Bobby Lee. It's funny sometimes.
He's great. Bobby Lee's amazing. I've seen him live. He's a great comedian. My point, he performs like, wow, that was amazing. He gets off stage and sits next to them, like at the bar or something, like like moments later. They're like, dude, that was great. He goes, ugh, that was awful. I sucked. I was terrible. And maybe in their eyes, he was awesome, but in his eyes, his standard of what's great is so much higher, and that's what a championship standard has to be. We have to look at that game and be like, that was unacceptable if we're trying to win the national, which we still can. We're still in it. We're right there. We've had one really awful game, and other than that, we've had one really awful half of football. And other than that, all the lamenting has been just from sloppy play. We have to be able to flip this thing around mentally, and then we'll be back on track. And Miami's whatever to me. Penn State, if Penn State takes care of Ohio State, I'll eat crow. I don't think they're going to beat them, and they'll be taken care of. Oregon doesn't look like the bona fide number one. We've seen Georgia had the same issues that we're complaining about too.
Yeah.
So it's all within grasp.
For sure.
All right. See you later. Fisher Disciples, DJ, Nikki, Snacks, Crider, Hook 'em Horns, baby. See you guys next time.
Welcome.